Welcome back to the Dort Direct 5 podcast. Today we're going to talk about ancestry, and I want to set the record straight on a misstatement that I said in the previous video. In that previous video, you'll recall that I mentioned my loved one, and her name is Jennifer. I stated that she was German, 100% German, and that's a misstatement. And so, in order to clear the record, clear my conscience, so there's no questions about what that was all about, I want to bring Jennifer on, and we're going to do a FaceTime video, and she's going to show you exactly what her Ancestry.com is with regard to where her ancestors come from. And you'll see some different photos that show the European regions and they're like highlighted and that type of a thing. She'll explain that, and we'll have that interview here right now. So I hope that you enjoy that, and this is going to be kind of a short little video, and I truly hope that you learned something from it. Here we go. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Dallas.
How's it going?
Doing good. Thank
Okay.
you for including me today. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in your own words, will you explain to our audience what exactly, just like what you'd like to say about your ancestry, maybe a little bit about your childhood, and what you learned in your childhood about your ancestry before we had this fabulous thing called the internet?
Yeah, I grew up in a family that is predominantly a German family. I've actually been told my whole life that I'm 100% German. Went to German camp when I was a kid. My family actually spoke Low German, just those kinds of things. And so I got to a point in my life where I tried to dig a little bit deeper because, at my heart, I don't believe anybody's 100% anything. So I actually wanted to do my own research. And so I started just actually with the family trees. Both sides of my family have been very intentional in not only recording our family history, but also getting together with family reunions and all those different kinds of things. And so I started digging through the family trees, and I have traced my family back on one side of the family to the early 1700s. And then
Okay.
the other side of my family, I've traced them back to the late 1600s. And what I found was all Germans. And so there's still an element for me where I was like, okay, well, maybe my family's onto something, but I do, want to take it a step further. And I said, let me try the DNA and see what the DNA gives me. And so I sent it to Ancestry.com, Ancestry DNA. I had my DNA tested, and basically what it came back is that I'm 100% European. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so, can you share one of the images for me that I shared?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. Let me get it pulled up here.
This is my DNA estimate, and it shows here that I am 61% Europe West, and then I'm 29% European East, with 10% other areas, but those other areas are also in Europe. And so those two circles kind of cross a little bit over Germany in there. I do know that my mother's family were Prussian Germans for a part of their history. And so that is kind of like more modern day Poland, where her particular family came from. My father's family came from northern Germany. Could you go back to the other image, please? Okay, so if you look at this ethnicity estimate, this one actually doesn't give you the percentages, but it shows you those two main regions where 90% of my ancestry comes from. But then there's a green circle, a red circle, a yellow circle, an orange circle, another light green circle. Those represent the last 10% of my ancestry each. I think the largest region in that section is only worth 4% of my total makeup. But at the end of the day, My ancestry does come from Europe. So one of the things that I felt was very interesting about this bar graph is that it talks about Europe West, which is the one that's majority of mine is 61%, that it goes on to say that somebody who's born and raised in Germany, somebody who's a typical German, that they would classify as a native German, their markers for Germany is 48% and mine is 61%. So from a DNA perspective, I'm more German than a native German. So
Okay.
I find that to be interesting. When I did my original DNA test, it was in 2016. And as more people do their DNA, Ancestry DNA has modified these totals because they have more data and more information to have probably a more accurate ancestry estimate for people to let them know where they come from. And so this is my updated estimate. This one was from 2025, from late 2025. And it still shows that all of my sections actually come from Europe, right? With the majority of them falling in that Germanic zone. I thought it was interesting too that even though I had this original estimate, that original estimate has changed in terms of all these other regions that they've come up with. But at the end of the day, it's still 100% European. And so, I just find it interesting because, it's these things that make up whether I have blonde hair or I have curly hair or I have blue eyes. And, I really appreciate getting this level of detail about just who I am personally as a human being on this planet.
And I appreciate that part because I think that, well, I was just thinking previously before we started talking about these different things when we made the call here that I was wondering, like, what means the most to you? Do you think that heritage means more to you than ancestry, or just the opposite, or they equally mean just as much?
I think probably for me, the heritage piece means more. However, the ancestry matters to me too. I try very, I should say, with intention to incorporate German customs into holiday celebrations or German
Mhm.
foods into, what we do. German is the language that I speak outside of English and trying to find ways to incorporate my children in understanding of that as well. I've taken my children to visit Germany and to spend time there so they can understand the land of their ancestors.
So speaking of which, your trip to Europe, to Germany, and you went to, what was the other country that you went to?
Well, I went to several when I was there, Amsterdam,
Yeah,
well,
Amsterdam.
would have been the Netherlands, obviously, England, Scotland, Austria, Switzerland. I went to several when I went last time.
Okay, so shout out to
Oh, yeah.
the
You can
so,
cover
so
Germany. You have to let the Germany's on the top. Yeah. Yeah, there it is.
So this hoodie here is a gift that Jennifer gave to me from Germany, and it means a lot to me, and I love wearing it. It's very comfortable, and it's like a different type of style or something because it doesn't have the drawstrings that flop down. They're tucked away in their own little eyelets, right? And I don't like drawstrings anyways, but this is a really special
Apropos
gift
what you're
gift to me.
wearing today, right?
Yeah, it's appropriate, right? So, okay. And the I wanted to make a comment with regard to my question about ancestry and heritage. My ancestry means a lot to me, as it does you, but really it's the stories. It's who we like as it's passed down through the generations. That's what actually like make us, in my opinion. Like we have blood, ancestral blood that is tied back to original countries, but we have this heritage of all of these different gifts of storytelling and all of the different things that are passed down through the generations. And that's what means the most to me. Obviously, that, I've got my own story and you've got your own story. And, your parents have their own story. And it goes on, through the generations. And I really think that that's the probably the most important thing to me is heritage.
I've tried to track down some of my ancestors that would live in Germany, but I have found it to be difficult because since my mother's family was Prussian Germans, that an entire family moved here to the United States. They were Mennonites, and as Mennonites, they, were getting trying their as Germans that were living kind of like in that border between, Russia and Germany. They were getting pulled into the war by the Germans. They were getting pulled into the war by Russia. And my family, as pacifists, decided that they were going to come to the United States to try to escape. One of my ancestor came with all of his siblings, and then when the war was over, the siblings of my ancestor all moved back to Germany. That entire family was annihilated. The only people who survived were the ones that stayed here in the United States. And
Yeah,
so there are some pieces, that are hard part of the history that,
absolutely.
you learn as you study it. But anyway,
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because you were speaking that they were Mennonites and the Anabaptists who are Mennonites and are Amish and are German Baptist, my background and my ancestry, they were very serious. There was serious religious persecution that was going on back in the day when you're talking about with regard to, your family. I don't know what year your family came, but my family came in the early 1700s and they escaped Germany to flee to flee religious persecution. And I want to talk about that at a different time, but because I've got some more research to do. But it is a real thing, and what's really difficult for me to look back on religious persecution, especially during that time when that was the Protestant Reformation, and the Anabaptists were part of of Reformed Protestants coming out of the Roman Catholic Church, and what is so very difficult for me to really comprehend is Protestants persecuting, killing other Protestants in that religious persecution. It's horrifying, especially because we live in a country of really religious liberty and in our postmodern society, because we have this thing that is, we're religiously tolerant for the most part, very religiously tolerant inside of our Protestantism. um, and I just have a really hard time grasping that whole concept of religious persecution. It's just something that's hard for me to fathom.
yeah, well, it's a fun fact too that maybe a lot of people don't necessarily know is that the German ethnic group is still to this day the largest ethnic group in the United States. It actually constitutes 24% of the United States population. And the fact that people don't know it's the largest ethnic group only shows to an extent how well they successfully assimilated into so many different communities in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, and that's important. I didn't know that percentage fact, and I was thinking about it earlier in the day, and I was just wondering, what is the ethnic the percentage of Americans today, and so I'm glad that you brought that up. Is that all that you want to talk about?
Yeah, thank you
Okay.
for letting me share.
I want to bring it to a close now, and I really appreciate your time, Jennifer, for explaining these different things. I know that they're personal to you, and I really do appreciate the information.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. We'll talk later. Thank you.